abortions with the Douglas Group, is that an issue that NAR should have an interest in? It should have no interest in abortions.
0.
I would say. Okay, my opinion. Right. Maybe you feel different. I know that's a very touchy subject. I just think that NAR being focused on housing should stay in that lane. This is Byron Lazine and Nicole White, and you were tuned into episode 347 of The Real Word.
Word is up. Wait, real quick. Your background has a racket. Is that new? Why have I never noticed that before?
I think the last few episodes of The
Really?
Real Word.
So I just have not been paying attention.
Being on the road, or not on the road, being home, actually. Being in
Yeah, well, the last
Naples,
one you were
Florida.
Here. I like it,
As the
though.
racket. Yeah.
I'm happy the racket's back. People are asking about the racket.
The biggest racket of the year has
Biggest.
been everything going on with NAR.
Yeah.
And the New York Times, though, they won't stop.
They won't stop.
I mean, a lot of the articles that we read now about NAR, the stories are broken by the New York Times. You get those stories absolutely free, no paywall on nowbam.com. There's other sites you have to actually pay for a paywall for a story that New York Times broke. Totally weird. I get it. But you don't have to do that on nowbam.com. Anyway, this story in particular that, made a lot of noise this week from the New York Times, which is titled How Realtors Nonprofit Quietly Funds Conservative Advocacy Groups. This story is not a breaking story, not a breaking bit of information. NAR has put out a statement to respond to this story immediately. So we'll cover both sides. But the point is, a lot of the information New York Times used in this story, you and I, Nicole, covered in episode 342 of The Real Word. So we can, and that was in the first half of that. We did that poll. If you remember, the broke agent did the poll, like who you voting for.
Right.
By the way, I don't think we ever recapped that, but the real estate community was pretty much in line with the percentages of what happened. It was really weird that poll was more accurate than some of the other polls out there. That being said, as part of that episode, we went through where some of NAR's money goes. So New York Times makes this headline as if this is not public information, meaning NAR's a nonprofit. Everywhere they spend money has to be publicly disclosed. And, this isn't breaking news, I would say, to that. But if you're catching up on the story, again, the title of the New York Times piece is How Realtors, NAR, Nonprofit Quietly Funds Conservative Advocacy Groups. The National Association of Realtors has created a nonprofit that gives more heavily to one side of the political aisle and to groups that have little to do with real estate and housing. We'll get into NAR's response, but first let's go through what this Times piece says. It kicks off the piece by saying the largest trade organization in the U.S., NAR, wields substantial influence over the American housing industry. To help hold on to that power, it also runs one of the biggest political action committees, routinely outspending even major companies like Amazon. Yeah, they are one of the biggest lobbyists for sure. Nicole, everybody that listens to The Real Word consistently knows that I am like one of probably the biggest critics of NAR. Okay.
Yep.
I'll be fair here in saying that you got to watch yourself with New York Times when you get into political stuff, because New York Times leans one direction very heavily. It'd be the opposite direction that they are claiming NAR is giving the majority of their political contributions to. Okay, so New York Times, which is left-leaning, makes the case that the PAC, the PAC, supports candidates who are in line with NAR's positions, regardless of party, and its spending is supposed to be bipartisan, meaning that of NAR. Half of this goes to Democrats in this PAC, and the other half to Republicans. Political neutrality is the backbone of the NAR brand, and I think NAR would probably say that is their
True.
position as well.
Correct.
That being said, about 5 years ago, NAR quietly created. Now, NAR has responses to all this. I'm just giving you what's in the New York Times
Right.
piece, right? NAR quietly created an affiliate nonprofit called the American Property Owners Alliance, and its spending tells a different story. While the PAC plays it down the middle, and Nicole, you've been like hit up like RPAC, Realtor PAC, like donate to RPAC, and then they try to hit you up like when you
renew, or they squeeze it in. They have the box checked for like $5 or $10 or something. Yeah.
They have the box checked for you.
You have to uncheck it and say you don't want to donate to it.
$10.
Yeah.
Unless you do want to donate, you leave the
Unless you
check.
do, of course.
Maybe
Yeah.
some people bump it up, $100.
Well, I already feel like I have like a late fee. So then it's like, I don't need this on top of my late fee,
Did you get your late fee straightened out this time? Are you good there?
Everything's good. I did
Right.
my continuing ed not on time, but they charged me like $600 to do it like before I was able to renew my license. We're good. We're good. That's all I do is pay late fees.
New York Times says the PAC plays it down the middle. This American Properties Owners Alliance. Okay. So APOA would be the acronym that you might see out there. They've appeared, according to New York Times view of this, to take in a different side. An examination of the APOA tax records, New York Times found that the nonprofit, which is solely funded by NAR, distributed $12.8 million in grants in its first 4 years. Nearly $10 million of that $12.8 million went to Republican-aligned super PACs and groups with conservative agendas. And Nicole, you and I went through a lot of this spending. We talked about this on episode 342. So not really news to us, but I think this was, maybe some of the groups and political groups that were receiving money from NAR. This might be, even for members, the first, awareness as New York Times breaks this story.
With this spin too, because you're hearing it, it's saying quietly and like they're funneling money here and it's a passway and a throughway. And I think the way that they're also presenting it makes you think that like, oh my goodness, did I not know about this? Like,
yeah, I mean, it certainly brings a lot of questions to the surface for
yeah.
Anyone who's not following this or doesn't have a lot of real understanding of where some of the NAR money goes to. On the website for APOA, it states the mission that the American Property Owners Alliance supports common sense solutions to address today's most pressing housing issues. I don't have a problem with the mission statement. Common sense solutions make sense to me. I like common sense. And we have pressing housing issues. But according to the examination of the tax records by the New York Times, only one organization that received a grant between 2020 and 2023 listed housing or property rights among its goals. That would be a problem with the mission. That Republican-aligned organization was Americans for Tax Reform, which received $25,000. That's a far cry from the 12 plus million that's been distributed through this organization. Among other grants distributed by, can we say APOA? Would that be the right way to say APOA? Can we just
if that makes you feel better, would you rather say that?
APOA?
Go for it.
Sounds weird.
It does
APOA.
sound weird. I'm sure that's not what they say. I'm sure they say it's APOA, but if you want to say APOA, it takes you just as long to say APOA.
As it does saying it a lot. APOA.
APOA.
According to other grants, a significant portion was directed towards groups aligned with conservative agendas. Here's a breakdown according to New York Times. One Nation received $7 million. That is the name, One Nation. This nonprofit is aligned with Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Ugh, gross. And contributes to the Senate Leadership Fund, the largest super PAC for Senate Republicans. Yeah, I mean, anything that's putting money into anything Mitch McConnell, he's the guy, Nicole, that is like, he's about as there with it as like President Biden
I know who
is.
he is.
He freezes on screen, you know?
Yep.
American Action Network received $2.5 million, founded by former Senator Norm Coleman and Fred Malek. This is a Republican advocacy group which supports conservative causes. Opportunity Matters received 100,000. Republican aligned super PAC focused on promoting conservative policies. American Unity Fund received 100,000. Republically aligned LBGTQ advocacy group that champions same-sex marriage. I don't know what that has to do with how that's a lot of these are like, where is the housing connection as you read it stated by New York Times understanding of these groups. House Majority Forward received 3 million. An organization is a key contributor to the Democratic House Majority PAC, a leading super PAC for Democrats. So you have 3 million going that direction. National Black Empowerment Council, $40,000. Nonpartisan group, wanting to close the wealth gap between Black Americans and other groups. Douglas Leadership Institute received an unspecified amount. It's a Christian community focusing on the Black community and campaigns to reduce abortions within this demographic. What in the world? All right. So the response from NAR, though, is this. APOA has an issues-based grant-making process to organizations on both sides of the aisle. Cherry-picking data can tell one story, but a holistic review of APOA giving reveals that its giving is split and changes from year to year based on current priorities. For example, in 2023, more than 70% of APOA grant disbursements were made to left-leaning organizations. APOA does much more by way of advocacy than grants alone. So in that statement from the NAR spokesperson, it acknowledges, Nicole, that they are
Yep.
giving money to left and right leaning organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that becomes clear. They're not denying giving to partisan organizations. They don't actually dispute a lot of what's said. They say cherry picking data, which to me says, okay, there's a lot of data in here that is accurate, but you're cherry picking to make us look bad, right?
Right.
And that New York Times didn't take a holistic approach, a holistic review. Something like, if you're going to review a lot of this stuff, it should be pretty black and white. Like, I mean, I get it. There's an impact greater than what the spending and all of that happens, but to say that New York Times is going to take a holistic review when they're breaking down where money goes, this is just like, hey, money's going here, money's going there. We're adding it
Right.
up on both sides. And this is
There
what we're,
shouldn't be any ones that cause a question if it is in line with the mission.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so now there was also questions raised about APOA's grants, because they talk about the grants in here. The grants distributed are raising concern um, among NAR members. Okay. One issue is whether the funding aligns with real estate interests. I mean, some of those things like the advocacy for same-sex marriage, American Unity Group. I'm totally for same-sex marriage. That being said, to fund that, it's not the right vehicle.
Right.
NAR is supposed to be about housing.
Housing.
Not sure what anybody's marriage, same sex, different sex, marrying a octopus would have to do with housing. Okay. I know a lot of times you get married, a house, an interest in buying a house comes afterwards, but NAR is a nonprofit. It should be pretty focused in on housing and not some of this other stuff. Abortions with the Douglas Group, is that an issue that NAR should have an interest in? It should have no interest in abortions,
0.
I would say. Okay, my
Right.
opinion. Maybe you feel different. I know that's a very touchy subject. I just think that NAR being focused on housing should stay in that lane. Okay. Um, there's a report that goes against critical race theory with One Nation. One Nation got what was it? Big one, 7 million. Okay. A report against critical race theory. There's people that support critical race theory, people that have issues with critical race theory. We're not going to get into that on this pod. The point is that shouldn't be an issue that NAR is putting $7 million into. Okay. So I would agree with those issues or with the issues on these grants. There was an agent with the Oxford Property Group in New York, learned where the funding was going. She was horrified, she told the Times. She says critical race theory, this is her quote, critical race theory and abortion are completely irrelevant to the world of real estate. They should keep their nose out of it. They are a trade association. Okay. I think a very small percentage of people out there could tie these types of social issues to anything. They would stretch as far.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about community and like how yeah, I mean, I get it.
They'd stretch as far as they can to bring some of these issues into everything in the world. But
Right.
I would actually agree with this Allison um, Dutch, Dutch, the agent with Oxford Property Group in
Yep.
New York. Like, she's like, hey, I mean, we should be pretty much narrowly focused on things that this association should directly impact, which is housing. Um, Another issue in this in this new concern among members is how NAR dues are being used. Like, that is a concern, New York Times, that we have across the board. And I think it is right to bring everything to the table. NAR should puke up a lot of their spending that has gone on, both, politically based spending as well as just like, but to me, this $12 million that is spent here in this APOA over 4 or 5 years is still not the issue when you look at $50 million per
Well,
year
but
on
but
ad campaigns.
but
Not that
really,
I'm saying
why
it's
but why was this subgroup even created then if their main focus should be common sense, you know, like advances in real estate?
and what
Like I
I mean, shouldn't that
that's
be NAR's part of NAR's mission, common sense advances
that's what
in
I'm
housing?
saying. So why does it
It's
have
like
to be this like subcategory, nonprofit that is the I don't it just doesn't make any that doesn't make any
there's a
sense.
lot of these organizations within the organization, you come to learn, and some of them, really do a good job. Like, some of them have realized,
I wonder if there's anyone on payroll on that one too.
"Oh, for sure. What do you mean? It's all up what do you wonder?" Like, you don't wonder for long, Nicole.
No,
Like, do you need more than 5 seconds to wonder if there's
Or
some
unless
money?
maybe they're volunteers too.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah,
So, there's a lot of these organizations that are within the organization. Some of them are really for good, where it's like, "Hey, we wanna raise the bar." The problem is the mothership hasn't, done that
yeah,
for the other agents. So this other agent, um, that's mentioned here, Tony Mancuso, he's the immediate past president of the Washington, D.C. Association of Realtors. He brought this up at an annual NAR meeting. He asked for clarity about APOA's process, received no answers, according to him and New York Times. The alliance was given control over what is basically a slush fund, Mancuso says. But the money in that account is dues money. So the money that goes into APOA, Mancuso says, is you can tie it directly from dues money going into the APOA account.
yeah,
However, a spokesperson stated that the idea that NAR is giving an enormous proportion of its net revenue to APOA is another myth. And so APOA receives 6.6 million on the books here grant in 2025. And so when you look at the hundreds of millions that NAR is bringing in, you say 6.6 million. The NAR spokesperson, just based on being able to use a calculator, would be right. It's not a huge amount of money. So they're playing semantics. They're like, hey, this
it's still
isn't,
money. It's like
it's still money. Yeah. I mean,
it's still money that
it's
we're
like,
paying, like money.
it's like
Yeah,
right now, the Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, that's been in obviously a lot of headlines. A lot of things are coming up like, okay, it's not about necessarily federal employees. It's like, what are these budgets being spent on? One of the, spends from one of these military, company, so there's like a few different big military companies. I don't know which one, but they were charging like an extreme thousands of dollars for soap dispensers to the government. It's like, yeah, when you look and you say, oh, what percentage of employees does the federal government, what percentage of employee salaries is made up of the federal government? It's a small percentage, but you have to keep going layers deeper. Now, what percentage of the budget that they control are they just not having a good control on what's being spent? And that's when you look at NAR. It's like when you actually look at everything, there's going to be a lot of excess that is in the spending. I always point out the easy one is the $50 million media budget to create crappy commercials. That's an easy one to point out. Anybody with eyeballs and just like a little bit of marketing sense can point to that one. They sent out a fact check. We have it linked, the full fact check. It's 2-page PDF. We have it linked in the nowbam.com article. That'll be below for you. Okay. They say there's a lot of myths in this New York Times article. APOA is a shadowy pass-through advocacy organization for NAR. They go back to announcing the launch in 2020 with a press release. They had a media push. They periodically promote its work through NAR channels like Realtor magazine. Nobody reads that, by the way.
Hmm.
It funds APOA through an annual grant, which is fully transparent to our members and the public. I agree with that. It is like, but the thing is, how many members know that, read it, look at it, have an understanding? This is where I might be pushing more to get involved to try to clean up from inside. It appoints board members to the APOA board of directors, which operates independently and without oversight from NAR. Well, if you're giving them the 6.6 million,
all the money that they have,
is there any they said without oversight. So there's a distancing now. It sounds like from the spokesperson almost. That's how I would read that.
Yeah.
Like, we
Yep.
don't oversee it. We just give them 6.6
We just give
million.
them their entire budget. We just provide them our dues.
Give me
Yeah.
6.6 million with no oversight this year, and guess what's
Yeah.
going to happen?
Right. Your
Okay.
buddies are gonna be paying themselves.
I'm going to have a golf membership not only in Florida but in Connecticut as well.
Let's
Okay.
go. And
I
your wife
mean,
can fly with you. I mean,
I'll be flying a lot of JSX. That there's a new airline, Nicole. I don't know if you've heard of it,
I
JSX. This is
haven't.
not a promotion, by the way, because JSX, you want to throw me some free flights, I might mention you a few more times, but you can get private flights. This will be like 12 people, I guess, that book it. Haven't done it. Very interesting. 6.6 million, no oversight, might do it. Next myth, nearly 10 million went to Republican aligned super PACs and groups with conservative agendas. So NAR says this is incorrect. The only super PAC giving NYT sites is 100,000 to Opportunity Matters, which is not, in fact, a super PAC. Opportunity Matters is a 501c4 organization. APOA does not engage in political activity as defined by the IRS. This sounds like a very legal response.
Of course, as defined by the IRS.
Okay. As defined by the IRS. Okay. There you go. Now, if what the New York Times is saying about some of those groups, same-sex marriage or abortions is like where money is going to, those would seem to me like political driven organizations that have an agenda one way or the other on those issues. Critical race theory, to me, those would all be categorized as social political issues,
right?
That NAR should not be involved in. And if there's, significant investment from APOA going into that, as opposed to what their common sense housing policy mission is, that I think there'd be a conflict there. New York Times myth, as NAR calls it, APOA was conceived and created by one individual through a quiet internal process. APOA was launched to focus on property owners exclusively, is what NAR's fact check says. The idea for an organization emerged in 2019 from a working group tasked with assessing how to modernize NAR's approach to advocacy. Modernize NAR's approach to advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
APOA was one of several recommendations made by the working group and was approved by NAR's board of directors in November 2019 at NAR's annual convention in a vote of 771 to 22. Yes, NAR's board of directors has
Huge.
almost
800 members.
Crazy board. I mean, Amazon's board, or pick any company on the publicly traded board, is not that big, but the vote was overwhelming there. 771 to 22. And I don't, you know, I don't think that that's an inaccurate statement by NAR that that was the vote. Of course, that's it. That's going to be public knowledge and information at this point. Calling this a slush fund for NAR to funnel untraceable dark money to outside groups. The fact check from NAR is dark money is a term that refers to shielding political spending from reporting requirements to other public transparency obligations connected to registered political. We know what it means. Okay. You know, so NAR defines it, and then they say NAR and APOA disclose all required advocacy related expenditures in full compliance. So another legal
Well, they're saying
response.
that you got to see where they spent it. So they're not pretending to spend it anywhere. They are spending it where they're spending it. And the reason that you guys have this information is because we are telling you where we're spending it.
Yeah. And I've like, to the point of the New York Times article not being like some breaking news, we talked about a lot of
Yeah.
this spending on episode 342. I think this article has helped bring it into light. I don't know
Well,
that.
it's now bringing into light where the money is going.
Yeah. I,
I don't know that anybody would necessarily argue the APOA if it was going towards the things that it said that it was going to be going towards.
yeah. I didn't do
Um,
the research on, it wasn't was it Family Matters? What was it? Opportunity Matters. Family Matters was a show in the 90s, right? Was that
it
Family
was a
Matters?
show in it was a show in the 90s.
Opportunity Matters, like what some of these groups do.
Yeah.
We didn't go CoffeeZilla on that report that we were looking at on episode 342. Maybe we should have.
Clearly, I mean, because we would have broke some news. Yeah, I mean, the New York Times is definitely spinning it to make it sound like, and I'm not disagreeing with them,
New York Times is stating that
that this is very, like, fishy,
uh,
but
uh,
NAR is saying it's not fishy, we're telling you exactly where the money's going towards. But I think what New York Times is saying is that where the money is going is very interesting.
the bigger accusation that they're making is that this giving is not consistent with the organization's tax exempt status. And that's where you're seeing some of these fact check
Right.
legal responses, because NAR certainly needs to protect their tax exempt status in
Well,
order
that's probably
to
why NAR's
exist.
like, "We're so far away from this,"
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, maybe NAR would be more accountable if it didn't have a tax exempt status, if it had a if it was for, maybe even, profit, but and that any profits on top went back to members in a dividend or brokers through a
Or it
dividend.
just went to fund the next year, you
Yeah.
know? Like,
So
I
NAR's position is that NAR and APOA are nonpartisan organizations, and their expenditures across blah 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 blah.
yeah.
They stick to 2023 being 70% made to left-leaning organizations. By the way, 2023 would have been a smart year to make left-leaning 70% go left-leaning, being that 2023 the left was in control, right? And so maybe they're swinging to where the control is. Not sure, but very interesting. NAR's responses. You can read their full detailed 2-page PDF response inside the article, which will be linked up down below. Other than that, I think that's kind of the gist of this story. You can get, obviously, if you don't have New York Times and you don't have another paywall that you have to fight through to get the New York Times paywalled story, you can just go on nowbam.com. We break it all down there for you with absolutely no paywall. The link will be down below. Other than that, Nicole, there wasn't,
Juicy. It's juicy. I like
yeah,
it.
there wasn't much other than I will mention Real Deal reported that DOJ drops RealPage antitrust case. And the sense is here, the sub headline for the Real Deal is case closed as President-elect Trump is expected to de-emphasize antitrust enforcement. So maybe a sign that the DOJ statement of interest that we saw, a couple days before the NAR settlement might not be something to worry about. Just maybe one early indicator of that we'll obviously see post J20th. All right. New York Times,
Yeah,
we're waiting
happening,
for the next drop. I
right?
know they've
Well, I
got
mean,
three
might
or
as well
four.
kick us while we're down, right?
Well, drop a few more. I mean, what the heck? I know they have it. New York Times agenda.
Well, I think they want us to start 350 in the new year, so they're throwing us
They they want us to do pods during
a few
the
golden
holiday
nuggets
break.
here as the year ends. Yeah, they want us to hit our number.
There's no question about it, and I've said this, as critical as I am of NAR, New York Times wants to, like, have a part in dismantling the real estate industry as you know it. They hate NAR, um, and they're gonna do everything they can to continue dropping stories that would break NAR. We'll see what New York Times, but, this one here, not a big breaking story. We'll see what they come up with next. They're going to have something,
For
for sure.
sure.
And I'd love to, maybe we should get one of these New York Times writers on the pod. I'd love to have
Yeah?
that. Like, who wrote this story? This was Deborah Kamen, and she's covered NAR for 2 years. She's been examining the sexual
Sexual
harassment
harassment.
allegations and price fixing lawsuit, as she called it. So
Deborah sounds like the gal
I'd love to
to
get
get
Deborah.
on.
Bobby, if maybe ask Vanessa to reach out to Deborah and see if we can get her on the pod. I'd love to have a conversation with her and just see how they're thinking about NAR from the New York Times perspective, and maybe she'll leak a story right here on the Real Word to stay up to date and have us sift through all the nonsense in the news portion of the real estate industry. Stay subscribed here to Now Bam on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, I'd love for you to leave us a review there. Nicole, great talking with you. Thank you.
Too. Yeah.
Keep it real, guys. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.
Agents looking to stand out from the crowd and from the marginal agent? Reminder Media is a resource you need to check out. You get your own branded print and digital magazines, email newsletters, and social media content. Reminder Media delivers these resources to your contacts on autopilot, keeping you top of mind with your database. All you need to do is focus on your relationships and your follow-ups and watch referrals and repeat business come in. My team uses the service where we do over 500 transactions a year. 50% of those transactions come from people we know, and we stay top of mind with Reminder Media. Use the link down below to try Reminder Media. At BAMX, we listen to what real estate professionals want and need. That's why our platform is filled with sought-after courses, content, and tactical assets for your business. And that's why we launched BAMX in a box with templates and scripts done for you, delivered each Friday. The best part? It's not coming from panel pontificators who bought their followers and don't sell any real estate. It's coming from top agents, team leaders, and content creators in the industry. It's education that actually shows you how to do what you need in today's market. And now it includes editable templates and scripts so you can easily deliver that knowledge to your database. Every day, we continue to add more content into BAMX, into our private Facebook community, content that works, content that our members have exclusive access to daily. So do not wait any longer. Use code REALWORD and join the thousands of agents taking their business to the next level today. Code REALWORD for 10% off. I'll see you in BAMX.